Good afternoon, viewers. Welcome to episode 10 of the PSOJ COVIDcast JA. Today, we're going to be talking about reopening business safely. As you are aware, come June 1, the work from home orders will expire and they're not going to be renewed. So businesses are looking at how do you safely get your workers back into business. You're also watching television and seeing what's happening all over the world. You're seeing the reports on Twitter and Instagram as businesses are grappling and economies, countries are grappling with how do you safely open? What are the necessary protocols? So from a PSOJ point of view, we've been working with the Ministry of Health. We've been working with citizens groups. We've been working with various sector organizations, and we've been doing a very granular scan of global best practices and assisting the government, because this is a collaborative effort. We are working together as private sector, as citizens, as government, collaborating to ensure that we are looking at ways to reopen sectors for the safety of all of our citizens. Today we have a fantastic panel. We'll be having some energetic discussion and we are looking forward to your commentary. We want your comments. We want your questions. And if you have not yet received our guideline document or SME memo, note that you can send your email to sme@psoj.org. Every week we send out a memo with the points of whatever discussion topic. And can you imagine, we are at episode 10. So we're looking at defining the operating protocols for all sectors of the economy, the result of the PSOJ's global scan, and we're going to have with us a face that's very familiar to all of you, Nevada Poe, who is the Chief Project Architect on the PSOJ Access to Finance project, a project that has pivoted to include looking at COVID. And we are also joined by Courtney Cephas, who is a Senior Director in the Ministry of Health. We've been working with Courtney. And we're also joined by PJ Wright, who is a Director of Mint Cleaners, and we're looking at sanitizing, at cleaning, at how he has pivoted his business to be looking at this particular area. Now, it's so funny, we have been looking over the weeks at the various issues that are affecting SMEs, and one of the things we talked about is that a major area of business development that would arise is in sanitization, because everybody wants to know, how is this building clean? You're not going to go into a hotel room the same way you used to, where you bounced in, looking at the big comfortable bed. You want to know, when was this room cleaned and how was it cleaned? And is it cleaned according to global standards? So Nevada, in fact, let us look at a video. Hi, Nevada. Nevada is joining us, the lead architect on the PSOJ SME project. Nevada
Hey, Rachel.
Jamaican, as you can hear from his accent, who lived overseas for several years. He worked on Wall Street as an international financial consultant, and he has come back home to serve his country. And what a time for him to be back here. Welcome again, Nevada. Are we going to be looking at the video, the Marriott video? Let's look at that video, and I think it will help us to launch into our discussions.
For over 90 years, Marriott International has been dedicated to taking care of our guests with a focus on quality, exemplary service, and trust. Today, these values are more critical than ever. As we welcome you back to our hotels around the world, we are committed to providing you with a safe environment that aligns with expert protocols for working to defeat COVID-19. With consultation from our experts in public health, we are redefining our cleaning and safety standards. Starting with our public spaces and high-traffic areas, we're going above and beyond our normal protocols. We are cleaning surfaces with increased frequency, dedicated staff, and recommended cleaning agents. Hand sanitizing stations are being installed at hotel entrances, at our front desks, our elevator banks, and meeting spaces. Signage in public spaces will remind our guests to maintain social distances. We will be adding partitions at check-in to provide extra level of precaution for our guests and their associates. In our guest rooms, we have added to our rigorous protocols, ensuring all surfaces are thoroughly cleaned with hospital-grade disinfectants. And we will be placing disinfecting wipes in each room for your use. We're rolling out enhanced technologies, including electrostatic sprayers, to sanitize surfaces throughout the hotel. Our mobile technologies provide reassurance and distancing options for guests. In over 3,200 hotels, your phone can be used to check in, access your room, and order room service. It can be specially packaged and delivered right to your door without contact. We will actively monitor and evolve our solutions to ensure a continued focus on the health and safety of our guests and associates. So when the time is right, we're here, ready to welcome you back. I'm Bill Marriott, and you got my word on it.
Nevada, how things have changed. Once hotels were telling us about the great food they have, the comfortable beds, the lush rooms, and now we're talking about a commitment to clean. What a time.
This is unbelievable.
Unbelievable. From the PSOJ point of view, just to remind our viewers, the work from home orders are not being renewed. So they will expire, and come June 1, businesses will now have to look at which workers need to come in. What does readiness for workers to come in look like? We are actually promoting businesses looking at flexible work schedules, flexible work weeks, flexible work days, and where persons are able to work from home, that they do work from home. However, our economy has in fact not shut down. There's several businesses has continued. The banks are still open and up and running. So Nevada, when we are talking about a state of readiness, and when we're talking about protocols for reopening or protocols for keeping your business going in this time, can you give us an idea of the scope of what is being considered?
Okay, so one of the things that we did quite early on, actually, we keep updating it, is that we had launched some very deep research as the PSOJ into global best practices. So everybody around the world, first world countries, second world countries, third world countries, were looking at industry by industry, sector by sector, how they were going to reopen. And we did a first scan back in March, and then we did a second scan back in April as more discovery about the disease occurred, more protocols were coming out, more understanding of what it is that people would be seeking. But here's the thing that we need to understand. The protocols are both, as we saw with Marriott, right? The protocols are both a health issue, right? But also a marketing issue. Because it's not only open the business and let the people come. People have to feel comfortable coming. So we're going to say all kinds of things. That Marriott ad is going to be replicated all over. For example, there's a hotel I regularly stay in when I travel in the UK, and they have a proposition where I can buy my room that I'm going to stay with at 25-30% of the cost for 3 days before I get there. So I can be assured that no one is in my room for 3 days before I get there. In addition, they offer, you can bring your own sheets, which I would never think to do, but when they put that out there, and also as a possibility, you could buy new sheets. So if you want to be assured that the sheets that are on your bed have never been used, no. Again, there will be many, many price points and many things around how people engage with these protocols. But remember, the protocols are about keeping workers and customers safe, but also selling the idea to workers and customers that they are safe. And the two are fundamental in terms of opening the business again. Because again, you may open the business, but if your workers don't feel safe, they're not going to come in. They're going to resist. Similarly, you may open the business again, and if your protocols don't convince customers that they're safe, you may not get the customers. So recognize that the whole issue of protocols is both health and marketing.
But also, in previous times, we didn't think of the worker, the customer, the public Anybody that was walking in, anybody walking by, all of a sudden, everybody is a consideration. So
Yes.
health and the economy. And the PSOJ has issued a memo this week, and the memo is a 7-step framework to opening an industry. Can you
Yes.
tell us just a little bit about what went into this body of work? And then we
Yes.
can talk about what some of these protocols look like.
Okay, so based on our global scan of all of about the activities, we try to consolidate it simply into what actually needs to be done. We work as you said, very closely with the Ministry of Health, and Cephas is actually on our team. So there was a lot of input from the government around what these protocols and situations are. Once we had a sort of standard framework, we then started to use it in specific industries. So we have, for example, done protocols for the bar industry. We have starting to do protocols for the restaurant industry. We're starting to talk to daycare. So we've expanded now to test this 7-step process in various industries. And that's kind of how, in about 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we're going to come up with all kinds of things for various industries very soon. So what I want to start with is, what are these 7 steps? What specifically are the things that need to be done, right? The first is understanding what we call the touch risk and the economic significance. By touch risk, it means how difficult is it to maintain social distancing in a particular industry? For example, barbers and salons, it's quite difficult. Why? Because you have to be intimately connected with the person.
So those are sectors. So,
yes.
so that our viewers understand, what we are now joined by Nevada Poe, who is a lead architect for the PSOJ SME project, and we're looking at the 7-step framework to reopening an industry safely. And we're looking at point number 1 for those of you who are just joining us, looking at the touch risk. So Nevada, please break it down for our people.
Yes, absolutely. So the touch risk is, how difficult is it to maintain social distancing? And as we're giving the example about barbers and salons, very hard for you to be distant from them because they need to be intimate, right? A very small restaurant with a lot of tables close together is also high touch because, again, difficult to maintain social distancing in a very tight space. So anywhere where there's high touch risk and large number of people impacted, you need very strong protocols because you've got to be sure that you manage the contagion at the level of the individual. If you are too loose with the protocols and it affects large numbers of people, you could quickly have a rise up in the contagion again. So that's the first issue. Then you want to look at how economically significant, if with a low touch sector, where few people are impacted, you can get away with weaker protocols. So that's good. Step number two, you actually have to define the sector protocols for these various subsectors. You've got to think about workers differently than you think about patrons. You also have to think about the physical layout. You have to think about what activities are allowed versus forbidden. And then you have to think about scenario planning. What if a customer has symptoms? What if a worker gets tested positive? What if a worker's wife or daughter gets tested positive? So we're going to spend a little more time a little later in going in detail into step number 2. Step number 3, you need broad stakeholder buy-in. So what we are doing in the PSOJ in our area, once we have done a draft version of the protocols, we find experts in the field, suppliers, real bar owners, people who work there, potential customers, and we literally sit down with them and do a line item edit of the protocols. So we have this long conference call where everybody sort of gives their input. We make the adjustment, we send out the protocols again to get approval, and we sort of build on that. So the critical thing is getting stakeholder buy-in about which things are reasonable, what should be mandatory, and what should be guidelines only. Then step 4, determine the sector support required. In some situations, you may need adjustments in the regulation, right? OSHA, for example, regulations and so on, you may need to adjust those.
And when you say OSHA for our viewers, that's the Occupational Safety and Health legislation.
Absolutely, absolutely. right? They may need collateral materials. For example, some of the bars, the suppliers, for example, Ray and Nevio and Red Stripe and so on, may end up providing the collateral materials because many of the bars are small, especially the corner bars, operate on very thin margins. So collateral material may be an issue. They may need some funding to restart. They've been closed for a while. So one of the things that we saw that Red Stripe did, which was incredible, they gave them some inventory to sort of get some of the bars started again. And then also protective gear, whether it's masks or PPE that may be needed, depending on the type of situation that it is. So that's 4. What would the sector support require? 5, once you have all these various protocols, you submit it to the Ministry of Health and Wellness to make sure there's alignment and approval so that the private sector is not operating distinct from what the ministry is giving as guidance, but in fact, it's a co-created document, critical, right? 6, public education and awareness. And I cannot emphasize this enough. We cannot just put out a memo like we've done. We cannot just have one press conference. We are literally trying to change behavior. Yeah. In order to change behavior, you have to show it. You have to show it again. You have to keep showing it. You have to do it in different situations. There has to be posters at the site. There have to be videos. There have to be emails. There have to be people going out and training. You know, for example, in the bar situation that we've done, many of the suppliers are training the drivers, the delivery drivers, to talk to the bar owners and talk to the waiters and waitresses, because that is going to be part of how we get the message out there. The message is not on a memo. The message is not a single press conference. The message is a constant reinforcing of what it is that we need to do to protect each other. And the message has to go to owners, to workers, and to patrons or consumers, so that each of us, R&I, which gets to the last point, the monitoring and the enforcing. No government has the resources to monitor an entire economy. So the monitoring is going to be left to us who live in a distributed way around the country. So for example, if you go to a bar or go to a restaurant as a consumer and you don't see the proper protocols in place, it is also your job to say, watch out, I mean, nah, come inside this your place, because you are not trying to keep me safe. So we also have to be the eyes and ears on each other to protect ourselves. It is a matter of monitoring and enforcing is about ordinary people, workers, customers, owners, looking at what is occurring and saying, I approve, I don't approve. Now, of course, there's going to be official channels. Yes, go ahead, Rochelle.
I'm reminding our viewers that we're talking about the 7-step framework to reopening an industry. So we have businesses that have been up and running, critical, essential areas of business. We're looking now, the bars just reopened. There are some protocols that were issued for churches being reopened. When we're talking about protocols, we're talking about the rules, the guidelines for the reopening of business, and also the continued operation for those who were always up and running. Now, some people may be listening and saying, so how so much rule is what kind of all of this excitement? What are we beating up our gums about? Nevada, why is this so important? Why is this process of defining the protocols, the communication, the enforcement, why is all of this so important?
Okay, now I want you to look, because again, what do we do as a PSOJ? We're looking at other parts of the world. So Italy is about 3 weeks open.
Yes.
And what has happened now is that the numbers have started to go up. So you don't want a situation where we open, we're not vigilant about protecting ourselves, and then we have to go close again. Because it seems as if in other parts of the world, what is happening? They're having this weird seesaw thing. Open, people get slack, can't bother. Now remember, Lord, happy to be out. And then because we are not vigilant for ourselves or for each other, the things start to spread again. So really critical if we want to keep a functioning economy. By the way, the big winner obviously is New Zealand, right? They locked down, did a lot of testing, took the virus under control, and they have opened with vigilant protocols, right? So they are managing it aggressively to be able to grow back their economy. What we cannot have is a situation where we are bouncing back and forth, because that will also create frustration, depression, and further economic destruction. So as we go out, every single Jamaican needs to be hyper vigilant about monitoring ourselves and monitoring each other, because that is the only way we're going to assure that we are not going to be in a seesaw situation. That's why this is crucial.
Yeah, and this is a very important message for our viewers, and that we continue to pass that message on, that what we're doing, we are trying to reignite our economy, and we're balancing it with a pandemic that is still very much around us and the safety of our people. So the importance of these protocols, because we do not want a situation where, as Nevada just mentioned, we are seesawing. This minute we're open, then we're closed because we're not monitoring. The government cannot do it on its own. We are collaborating as private sector, government, citizens group, but we have to be also hyper vigilant, and we have to be willing to say, I will not go into that establishment because you're not following protocols. So tell us about some of the kind of protocols that that have come out of this project, because it's been a very granular look at protocols. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Nevada?
Absolutely. So let's talk about workers first, right? If you've had workers who have been at home, one of the first things you want to do is that to interview them before them come in about exposures and symptoms. Do you live with anybody who was exposed or could be exposed? For example, you may be concerned about a worker who has a doctor as a husband, right? That's potential exposure, or somebody in the family who had gotten it. You want to assess elevated risk of exposure outside the job, right? These are things that you want to ask. Is it possible that people can continue to work from home, especially if they're vulnerable? Let's do that to try and minimize, again, the contact, especially if you figured out how they can be productive. Have online meetings, even if you are all in the office. So let's not encourage group gathering, where it's possible to just leave people distributed at their desk, and we do the same thing. It's a little strange, because we're like, well, we don't just all get in the meeting room. No, different time now. Temperature checks with non-contact infrared technology, which we've seen, and certainly places that have a lot of people coming in will actually want to do that. You need an orientation that you're going to have to repeat, and training about the protocols. So first day back at work, here's what we're doing. In 2 days, you repeat it. In a week, you repeat it again. In 2 weeks, you repeat it again to make sure that the protocols stick in, right? Do you need masks or PPE? That's critical. And if the workers can't afford it, is the company going to provide it? All that needs to be worked out. Is there going to be some kind of public funding? There's the sanitizing and the hand washing, which you keep talking about. Social distancing, both standing and seated. That's critical. And also how we face each other or don't face each other. There may be a need to change clothes at work. If maybe somebody has traveled through public transportation and the thought is at work, you may have to change in order to make sure you don't bring anything from the street out. The cleaning of the shoes, all of that stuff can be part of it. You could think about work shifts, so that you minimize the amount of people in the at the same time, and staggered lunch times. The preferences for private vehicles, or if you can't have private vehicles, have people travel outside of rush hour. Be careful of curfew, because again, you want to minimize the number of people that you're in contact with. Encourage food delivery versus going out for lunch. Again, minimize, right? Own labeled cups, plates, and utensils or disposables at work. Right? Very often right now we just wash the thing and just everybody use the same cup, the same fork and stuff. It may be that you bring your own. That's labeled. It may be that you start using disposables. What we would want anybody to do in terms of any industry that you're in is to look at this list as you think about your worker population, sit down with the workers, and then figure out which of this is critical for your area. Mandatory There's stuff that will come out from that's mandated, and there's stuff that's guidelines. Remember, what's mandated you have to do, right? That's Ministry of Health, large Ministry of Health protocol. What's guideline you would like to do because that's marketing. That means your workers feel safe because you're taking a higher bar than the basic mandatory bar to keep workers and customers safe.
And we have a question here from Carol Narcisse, and you have touched on the point, and she asked, for the many workers taking public transportation, what is the recommendation and how do businesses ensure the business's safety? And we have touched on some of those points, but anything you'd like to add on that whole point of public transportation?
Absolutely. So we're in the process again of working out, we're going to start pulling the stakeholder team together on this issue. And public transportation is complicated because here's the thing. First of all, there probably should be a maximum amount of people that are in the traveling unit. So whatever the number of people that you can normally travel, and remember, it's economically viable for the taxi men and so on to pack up the taxi, right? That's what we use, so that's what we know. Okay, but a packed taxi situation is not going to be that acceptable at this time. So it's likely between 25% to 50% of the capacity that you're going to have to carry. There may be other things, that certainly wearing your mask, certainly requiring that the windows are kept down, because the cross ventilation, keeping the air moving, is what you want, not a kind of air conditioned where we're exchanging things. Individuals may take personal things. For example, you take a towel that you sit on. You may not sit directly on the thing. You may actually sanitize your own section of the of where you're going to sit, and you're going to try and put distance between you and the person next to you. The drivers and so on may once or twice a day have, good to hear about mint cleaning, for example, you'll hear about later, some version of a deep cleaning facility. No, the complicated thing with this, right, and this is where it gets a thing. Many of the taxi drivers will tell you at 25 to 50% of the capacity, I can't make money. So that is going to have to be something worked out vis-a-vis the regulation. Remember I said some of the things will be regulatory. Will they be able to charge a higher fare? Will they be able to get deeper discounted gas? How are we going to make the protocol safety issues, but also try and make carrying people still economically viable? Because public transportation, obviously, is critical to the working of the economy. Now, what I've also heard already is that there are customers who are doing the discipline and saying, I am not getting in that taxi. There are too many people. I'm protecting myself and my children, right? So you see that where the public itself becomes part of the management.
The process, exactly. Exactly.
So second set of issues.
Yes.
Customers and patrons, right? Again, some of these mandated, some of these guidelines. All right. Appointments, even in sectors where this did not exist before. For example, in banking, they used to the quarter appointments, but most people just kind of walk in and you do your thing. That may you want to move more of that to appointments. Things like a barber, where I'm hairdressers, you tend to have appointment, but certainly a barber, I would just go to my barber and just do my thing. Now, you want to be in the business of making appointments so that, again, you minimize the number of people who are in the establishment at a time. Pre-ordering where possible, right? You go into a restaurant, so you don't matter, look at the menu, think about it, whatever. No. Every restaurant should put some version online with a website or Instagram of your menu, of your standard menu, so that people can know exactly what they're ordering. So I can call.
Because I'm running a cook shop, because not all restaurants will have websites or even are utilizing the internet. I have a cook shop. How does that part work?
But remember, many of these cook shops have what I call the standard menu, right? And what I cook that day. So it's curry goat, oxtail, fish.
They can see it.
They just can't see it, right? So that you know. Or you have a number. Places that I never had a number before. Me never have no number for anybody at Health Shop before. I would just go out to Health Shop. Now I have a number. Yeah. Now I call the people at Health Shop, right? And I say I want a delivery of fish, or I'll come out and I'll pick it up. Whatever it is. You want your customers to start to get telephone numbers if you're not doing the website thing. So all cook shop Nothing wrong. You have any cargo left? All right, I come in. By the way, I'm 5 minutes away now. Let somebody bring it out. I have the change, I have the exact change, right? So that whole thing, we just have to be now part of a process of making it happen, right? Pick up and delivery. By the way, wait in the car. The other day I went to one of the restaurants and I was saying, I don't get out. I just say, text me when the food ready. So I am 1 minute inside that restaurant as opposed to when I'll go, waiting, sit down, blah, 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 blah. No. So the whole thing about minimize into the crowd, minimize into controlled areas, minimize into air-conditioned areas. That's part of the thing that we think about. The masks, social distancing, both standing and sitting, queue management. Okay, we have seen those photographs outside the tax office and outside the Western Union and stuff where the people are bungalow, right? We need markings to create some distance. We need order. And by the way, the establishment needs to take responsibility for the waiting outside. It cannot be that Western Union or whatever sees their business only within their wall. If you see a bunch of your customers outside bungalow, again, it's a thing about protecting each other. Somebody has to go out there and said, watch you now. Well, lock the store. Till you line up, right? One, and so on.
From a lot of our remittance companies, the Western Unions, etc., and for the collection of funds that they have been proactive in recognizing that they had to change opening hours and put in markings. Yes. So we're expecting to see even more of this as businesses take responsibility for not only within their walls but externally. But we're certainly seeing that the markings are being put in. But I think our people too, we have to be very mindful that when we go and see a bundle, we don't just go and join the bundle.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So there's the queue management. There may be temperature checks with, again, the non-contact infrared, especially if it's a lot of people coming to a space. You want to make sure that nobody has symptoms. You may want dedicated hours for the vulnerable population. So maybe 1 or 2 mornings a week. If you usually open at 9, you open at 7:30 and tell people who are vulnerable, that's when they can come, right? So manage that aggressively. And then you may have time limits. Maybe you have a bar and you say, you know what, a 2-drink maximum to make sure that people are rotating. Because what we have found, or what you hear when you listen to the longer you stay in a space, you have a higher chance of catching. So actually, it's much better to have rotating people. So you may want time limits inside an establishment, right? And then applications and forms should be available online. The whole situation where you go in, give it a form, you fill it out, you sit there, you give it back, etc., etc. We should try and build a way from that. More digitization, more forms available. So I have it already filled out. If I can't fill it in by email, I just email it back because it needs a signature. I print it, I sign it, I carry it in, drop it off, right? And I go on. Don't ask me to go get the form and all that stuff. So that becomes a critical part. And wherever we can do, once testing is privatized, because right now all the testing is in government hands. Once we figure out private testing, then there may be situations like big companies where a lot of people work there, where you have random testing, right?
Yeah.
We're not there yet because
I see a comment here from Kia Jacina Duncan that talks about adding rapid testing for high touch areas. So even the whole concept of testing may be an area that you will find that businesses kind of pivot into, especially when rapid testing is possible and available. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we've talked, Nevada, about workers and we've talked about customers. We've touched on public transportation. I see Carol Narcisse asking here, should as many businesses as possible provide transportation for workers? This may be difficult for some businesses, but certainly where this is possible, this should be something that businesses and some of the larger businesses are already doing this.
Yes, and Rochelle, remember we talked about working with other businesses, right? So if my business can't do it, but I'm in a mall, there may be something that we create a mall bus and the workers, so there may be ways to, don't just think New Kingston is a hub. Yeah. Right? New Kingston is a hub. It does. So I don't necessarily have to solve the problem by myself. Talk to your neighbors. Maybe we can jointly come up and finance some kind of travel situation that supports the workers, right? Don't just think we're carrying this. Again, we're not carrying this alone. Everybody know what's going on. Everybody know what we're trying to do. We're trying to cost effectively protect all of us. That is what we're trying to do. Cost effectively protect all of us. So if you can carry some of this and me can carry some of this and we watching each other, we have a better chance of making this thing work.
Okay. What other protocols are you going to tell us about today? Because I think we've also talked about things like physical layout.
So next thing is the physical layout, right? Yeah. Physical layout, which is around, you need in this point sanitization stations and several, actually, if the space is very large. I'm going to show another page, right? There's the spacing and the facing of the tables. So we have to set up in some situations where the space is small, you don't want any chairs, because you want people to move. In other situations, you want to make sure they're spaced. Maximum number of people in the room. Rethink common areas like break rooms and lunch rooms with the layout and maximum numbers, right? Posters, signage, collateral. Remind everybody what is the appropriate behavior. Floor markings we talked about. Plexiglass dividers. We saw in the Marriott ad earlier that there is a plexiglass between the customer and the check-in, right? That never existed before at any of the hotels. Open doors and windows to increase the circulation of fresh air. Central air is what we don't like in this particular case. Now, sometimes you can't avoid it, and therefore you have to be particularly good about distancing and making sure you clean, you have high efficiency air filters, and you clean it very often. And then remove shared materials, books and magazines. You know, you got doctor's office, dentist's office, and have a magazine that everybody pick up. No, just get rid of those now. Out. So that's physical layout.
One of the things that in floor markings, I went to supermarket yesterday. Supermarket had a plexiglass around the cashier. But also I noted that there were arrows. So it was up one aisle, down one aisle, like one way in the aisle. And it's funny because I think we do have to give our people credit. We are getting more hyper alert, because I certainly was duncely walking up the wrong. I was walking up an aisle when I should have been walking up an aisle. And a lady pleased to tell me to please walk up the trolley because it's not an up aisle, this one. And so this is the kind of thing that we have to be willing to also point out to people when we're following the correct protocols.
Rochelle, absolutely. And that actually heartens me to hear that is happening. It means that we're learning and we're recognizing the seriousness of this. So that gets into one of our last year's activities, right? Some mandated and permissible. So frequent cleaning and sanitizing of surfaces, clean and sanitize work areas, make sure equipment that's being used is also sanitized. Forbid activities that do not allow for social distancing, like sometimes in the bar you're playing some games and stuff inside, dominoes and stuff can't work so well because it's hard to social distance. One-way direction of travel, as you talked about, the space to minimize people crossing each other. So again, as you said, the supermarket, some is a up aisle, some is a down aisle, and you have to wait. You cannot pass people, right? Overnight, you may want some deep disinfecting of the entire space, sanitizing of packages that are delivered. People must stand in pre-marked areas, cashless payment systems where possible, right? Because that's what you do, and the circulation of the money. Internal monitoring of behavior, encourage employees and customers to remind each other of good protocols, respiratory etiquette, coughing and sneezing into tissues or into your shirt sleeve. So we want a pandemic response plan, the same way we have fire and earthquake. And that has to do with what we call the what if scenarios, right? That means, what if a customer is showing symptoms? What exactly needs to happen? What if we hear a worker is exposed or is tested positive? What exactly needs to happen? We must know that before it happens. So that's the thing about what we call scenario planning, which is the last slide that I have.
But before we move on, for us who are just joining us, we are talking about the 7-step framework to reopening an industry. Quite a bit of information so far. If you are not already signed up for the email that comes out of the PSOJ, please sign up at sme@psoj.org. Nevada, we cannot go any further without recognizing a comment here from King's Jamaican. King's Jamaican says a lot of twisting and turning from mostly dopey virus. The only thing that makes sense here is early service and isolation of the elderly and vulnerable. And in fact, we're going to have Courtney Cephas, who is Executive Director in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. He's going to be on the program. And I'm glad this comment has come. You know, we always say in Jamaica, it's three things we're afraid of: dog, gunman, and dopey. So this dopey virus,
please make sure you ask Courtney. Ask Courtney if it's a dopey virus. Please, please.
And
are we overreacting? Yes.
The thing though is that we do recognize, and we had actually spoken to this earlier, you know, are we just making much of this? We've recognized that there have been thousands of deaths across the world. We've been watching the numbers, and certainly we've seen where economies have opened up and the numbers have spiked. So what we're doing is putting in all the precautions that are possible and also monitoring ourselves. But please continue sending in your comments. This is a discussion program, so we are very happy to get your comments. So thank you for that, King's Jamaican. So Nevada, what else we're going to talk to us
the
about?
last thing is what we talked about is scenario planning, right? And this is if a customer patron is symptomatic, you ask exposed workers to inform, report. Similarly, if an employee actually tests positive, there's got to be deep cleaning of the entire space, and of course, contact tracing both within the office and otherwise. But those steps specifically, right? Workers, customers, physical space, activities, and scenario planning is the way you need to think through the protocol. So I really, really encourage everybody to get the memo this week, especially if you're about to open your business, and make sure that you have thought through each area very, very carefully. The official things are going to come out, but whatever you can do sort of in advance of official things will make your life going forward much easier, right? Yeah. Critical that we protect ourselves while we open the economy, because we do not want a seesaw open and close. That will be the most disastrous situation. Okay. Rochelle, that's from me. Yeah. That's my thing.
Thanks a lot for that, Nevada. We also have a question here from Stephanie Daly. Would these protocols, after being implemented, be legal for letting an employee go? Not sure what specific area Stephanie is referring to, but just to be clear, what will happen is that there will be protocols that are mandated. So, for example, the Prime Minister has indicated that wearing a mask is mandated. Curfew hours were mandated, and certain businesses closing was mandated. Work from home was mandated. So what you're going to look at are things a part of regulations where an employee comes in and refuses to wear a mask. Yes, you can in fact send that employee home. Would you let that employee go? No, it depends on the various circumstances. So that's a whole bigger discussion, and I'm glad you've raised this question, because employees are going to be looking at the full gamut of things, and it is a collaborative effort because we all have a role to play in this. At this time, I think it would be great for us to just welcome Courtney Cephas, who is the Executive Director in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, and he's going to be talking to us about what the ministry is doing and the collaboration with various groups. Welcome, Courtney. How are you? Courtney, you're on mute.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Sorry about that.
Hi, Courtney. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Tell us a little bit about how the Ministry of Health has been working with the private sector on the protocols. What has this collaborative effort been like, and how is it working to have sensible protocols being put out?
Well, let me start by firstly, thank you for having me. Let me start by saying this, because this context is very, very important, because when you hear private sector, you normally, and some people might think there is big self-interest there. But let me start by saying this. There's tremendous amount of work that I've been engaged with, the ministry has been engaged with, and myself in the capacity of being responsible for all the philanthropic giving to the Ministry of Health. And I've never seen this before. I've never seen the private sector and individuals in Jamaica come together willingly, proactively to provide support of financial support, equipment to the ministry. It's as if I do nothing and they just come to the table and are willing. Courtney, what can I do? So against that context of really the private sector taking responsibility and seeing this challenge as their own is very, very important. Now you take the work that we are doing, that we have been working together in development of sectors. It's an extension of the work and the involvement of the private sector and how important they see it. And without these efforts, things would be much more difficult and our progress would be much slower. The collaboration has been very, very strong. And where I stand, and also I have been quite fortunate to work with the team. With the Ministry of Health and Wellness at the table, what it does is it ensures consistency in representation and messaging. What the ministry is saying, Ministry of Health and Wellness is saying in terms of certain requirements, the social distancing, sanitizing, whether it's wearing masks, and many other things. These things in our discussion, we have certainly incorporated them into the protocols that we are developing, and that has been good. The engagement has been quite dynamic and fluid. You with me at the table, we're able to cut a lot of the bureaucracy in terms of the relationship to the ministry and who do we need to bring in. I can facilitate that, and that has been quite good, and our dialogues there has been great.
And these are some important points, Courtney, because we have been talking from get-go. We've been talking about Jamaica coming together. Government has been promoting Jamaica coming together. So we are coming together as public sector, as private sector, as citizens, and we all play such an important role in the development of these protocols, but also the monitoring and the actual putting in place of these protocols. And certainly, one of the things too that I know our viewers want to know, and we're getting some questions that we're also going to go to, how do we know if we have the right protocols? We got a question earlier, should we just really be looking at the elderly and the vulnerable? Do we need to put all of these things in place? What have we been seeing happening in the rest of the world? And how do we know when we have the right set of protocols? At what stage can we feel even some level of comfort that we have the right set of protocols?
Well, the one will always say, and many times it might be in hindsight, well, that was wrong. We could have done it this way. I don't think that's the way we should look at it. The way we have approached it, and I think Nevada outlined it earlier when he went through the 7-step framework, which is a very, very good framework for looking at this. Once you go through a process like that is nicely detailed, it gives you comfort and it gives you more assurance that you are on the right track. You bring in the right stakeholders, you bring in varied stakeholders, you ask the right questions, and you take it down to levels of particular industry and sectors that we are doing. You make it relevant to that sector.
Detail.
Exactly. So, there might be certain things at the national level in terms of social distancing and sanitizing that we all have to do across the board and all this. But in a restaurant industry or in the bar, it's very, very specific things that they would have to do, and you bring it down to that. So it's now relevant to that sector. And when you do this, and then when you get the buy-in from all the stakeholders and stuff, you get more comfort that you are doing the right thing and you're on the right path. And essentially that's it. So, I would say 3 things: making sure that it's relevant to the sector, making sure that the concerns or those things that are very important from the health sector standpoint, those guidelines are incorporated, and then ensuring that we have a great stakeholder buy-in. And I think that 7-step process, we went through all that, and it puts us in a much better place.
And it's not about right. It's having
exactly. It's not about right.
To have the best set of of protocols based on everything that we've looked at. Right. I'm seeing 2 questions here that are looking at the role and function of the Ministry of Health and Wellness Foundation. Can you, because Courtney Cephas is the Executive Director of the Ministry of Health and Wellness Foundation. Can you tell us a little bit more about that, Courtney?
Yeah. So the Health and Wellness Foundation is the affiliate of the Ministry of Health that manages all philanthropic giving to the health sector. What happens is within the government, in order for you to have donations come in and stuff like that, that has to be processed, mandated that it has to be processed through a charitable organization. Reason for that is that it's only a charitable organization that can get certain benefits in terms of duty waivers and GCT when things are imported. In the past, a few years ago, it was a challenge when folks try to make donation because it was costly. They had to pay GCT, they had to pay duties, and it was a turnoff. It did not facilitate donations to come in. So the Health for Life and Wellness Foundation is that unit that is responsible for managing all and engaging with donors to make sure that the process is seamless, and also to make sure that when they do it right, so that when it comes in to the country at the ports, they have no duties and the GCT they are minimized.
Right. Thanks a lot for that, Courtney. And we're just going to switch gears a little bit, because one of the things, is that after you put in things like protocols, you put in all the work, we create documents, all manner of things. And, there's always a criticism that there's this work that's put, there is a task force that's put together. What happens after? And a key part of what we have mentioned earlier is communication, public awareness. Can you give us a bit of insight how the ministry is seeing this whole communication and pushing of the public awareness, because it has to land?
Yes, the reality is this: we have no cure at this point, and we have no vaccine. So the only thing that we have as defense against COVID-19 is some behavior changes that we have to do. We're asking folks who have lived all their lives, our lives in a social environment of touch and all that. And then suddenly we're asking folks to change that. Yeah. That is not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be an easy thing for people to do on a sustained basis. So it becomes very, very important for us to have very strong communication, promotion, and education among the population. Very, very important. That's the only way we're going to do it. We can't do it today or in just a few weeks. We have to do it on a sustained level. And to that end, the ministry has developed a plan, a risk communication and community outreach program, a plan for that. And that plan states exactly in the next couple of years, how are we going to execute on that? Because we have to do it in a sustained fashion. And the essence of that plan is three things. It asks the question of what, why, and how. And in terms of why, how do we inform, educate the population on target population on what they should do? And then in terms of why, how do we motivate and convince them that what they're doing, they should be doing it and it is needed? And then in terms of how, we provide specific guidance and tools for them to be able to do this. We can't leave people to do it by themselves. Yeah. We have to educate, we have to promote, and we have to continuously reinforce it. Private sector is going to play an important part in that also, because private sector, you have the customers, you have big touch points. And so leveraging the private sector and the touch point, there's an opportunity that we can work in tandem, while at the national level, the Ministry of Health sets the communication at the broad level. More granular, specific for sectors can be done by the private sector and complement the whole effort.
Yeah. So one of the key areas, tourism is so vital to us in the Caribbean and even more so for us here in Jamaica. When we look at the various protocols and guidelines for reopening business and sustaining business for our citizens and for our own private sector here, when we're looking at now the tourism sector, which is a whole other set of considerations, what concerns do you have, and what are some of the things that you're looking at where the tourism sector is concerned?
You that topic is front and center discussions right now because it's so important to Jamaica. Tourism, we earned what, $3.3 billion. We have 4.3 million visitors last year. It represents about 11% of GDP. If you take other industries that it relates to, that probably gets up to about 30%. So the industries are very, very important one. The question of reopening is it's a matter of when. And that call is, again, it's not a matter of what's right or wrong. A judgment call has to be made as to when that time is right. How do I look at it? And I think others within the ministry, I think I would put it this way. There are national level things that you would look at, and then I would consider there are sector things that you would look at. And at the national level, you have to be prepared at a certain level. There are things that we have to do at the national level. For example, I'll just give three things. We have to be in terms of folks coming in, because that's the greatest risk. This disease is something that was imported, and therefore folks coming in presents the greatest risk. And so at airports, things like thermal scanners. I think we have one now at the Norman Manley International Airport. But things like that, we have to make sure that we use technology, and things like thermal scanners are in place. We have to improve the process of facility for the process of bringing in folks. Long lines and clusters and all of that is a difficult. So we have to think creatively how we do that, and how do we integrate our health team, because when folks are coming in, that is the point when you want our health team to be involved. So we have to think about stuff like that. At airports, the two airports that we have, isolation facilities, we have to increase our capabilities there because there's going to be a need. So I just highlight three things. We have to be ready at the national level. There are things that has to be done. When you talk about now the particular tourist sector, there's things that within the tourist sectors that they have to do. And I think that's what part of the step that Nevada went through earlier. The facilities, they're planned. They have to ready their plant for tourists in terms of the social distancing, in terms of putting in sanitization framework. You have to think, how do you do that when you have large clusters of people coming in? Just to share an idea, maybe it's something you do, somebody's going to a restaurant where they all funnel in. Maybe your entry point at a restaurant, there are things that they have, their technology and their tools that they have, where that's like a tent that massive amounts of people can go through and get sanitized. Many things that they can do. So they have to be ready. And also they have to put in place detection systems within the hotel. When a client or a tourist is ill, or how do you quickly detect that and then take certain steps toward it? So I separate it at the national level. As soon as we hit certain things, then you can say good. At the sector level, certain things have to be done also in terms of preparedness. They go hand in hand. You can't do one and not do the other.
And then we have to be also constantly doing that global scan to see
exactly right,
following what kind of trends, but also where you're having increased episodes from particular countries. So there's still quite a lot to consider, but it's something that I'm sure is keeping you up at night. I see Justina Duncan is suggesting too that the protocols need to be made public in a very simple format. I think you touched on that. But also one of the areas that we need to look at is, after we talked about in the 7-step program, the whole issue of monitoring and enforcement. Can you talk a little bit from the ministry side? How do you see monitoring and enforcement? Because after we put in the protocols and we've told the community about it, we've told the public in a simple format, how do we actually effectively monitor and enforce? Courtney? It looks like we're having a slight delay in our broadcast. Signs that this is part of the times. So at this time, while we get Courtney back, we also have with us PJ Wright, who is a director of Mint Cleaners. So we've been talking about the various protocols, and a big part of that is sanitization. And we're bringing PJ to talk to us a little bit about his company and what their experience has been with sanitization and some of the protocols they have come up with. PJ, are you here with us?
I am most definitely here.
Hi, PJ. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. I most definitely am here.
So, PJ, tell us a little bit about Mint Cleaners, and a little bit about Mint Cleaners, but also what is COVID Clean? When you are now cleaning in this COVID pandemic environment, what is that all about? What does that actually entail? Because it's not just sweeping and mopping again.
Yeah. So there are companies out there that currently are using the term COVID Clean. I personally don't like that one. It seems a little bit opportunist. I think what we need to just focus on is sanitizing and disinfecting. And that is what it is, as in things that we all should be doing and practicing during this time. And what we do is that we come in through electrostatic, similar to what was in the Marriott, well, exactly what was in the Marriott's video, as that is the international technology that is being used currently. It is what they use. They go through and we spray and sanitize all surfaces. What it offers is a 360 covering that allows for even coverage of the chemicals, so that it doesn't create a toxic environment. Because as we know, the constant putting of hospital grade disinfectant on surfaces, it may eventually lead to a transfer of the chemical. So this puts down a very light layer, and what it does is just focuses on enough to kill the virus and stop transfer.
And I know some of our viewers are wondering, how does this actually work? I think we have a video that demonstrates what you are doing at Mint Cleaner. So we could look at that video right now. Thanks a lot for that, PJ. That's some serious deep cleaning that is going on. And I know for some of our business owners, we're looking at, we're saying what level of deep cleaning is actually necessary, and what's actually happening there, and how important is this deep cleaning, and how often do you need to do it?
So what you saw there was the sanitizing and disinfectant in action. Just as I said, with like the Marriott, it is one of the things that you use to prevent the transfer of the virus. as in it's on surfaces, and we have seen where it is that it's able to live on surfaces for a long period of time. So it is very important to stop the transfer. The mask will stop it from coming out, but we also understand, just similar to like washing up hands, it is the transfer. So with doing that, it's great for businesses, because what we're able to do is we're able to go in, do it on all services. We need depending on the amount of space it is, probably half an hour to 45 minutes for smaller spaces, probably an hour and a half for larger spaces. But the dry time is 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes after it's dry, it goes back to, you can go back to work, and it's a broad spectrum disinfectant that does not cause problems to human, but what it is, it focuses on the virus.
Mm-hmm. And you can also, this is not just about buildings, you can also do this in surfaces in motor vehicles.
Yeah, so all of the touch points within a motor vehicle, also seats on the vehicle, the seat belts, those areas that I realize that you wouldn't even realize that it possibly would be lying on those surfaces.
Okay, I'm seeing here someone is recognizing that this is that has asked if this is a new business venture, and very different from your other businesses. We've talked on this program before about business pivoting, and what a great example of business pivoting. So we do have some SMEs that are on our program. This is actually geared towards our small medium enterprises. So I'd just touch a little bit on this particular business pivot.
So as in, it's a very simple pivot, because as in, I'm mainly in entertainment and in restaurants. So when I saw that what was happening over in Asia, we saw where it is that it was being hit hard from in early December. I started to put things in place to try to protect my industries that I work within. So I reached out to Victory. Victory went ahead. We were able to get a distributorship, but when US was hit hard, Victory offered me a couple machines, but not a distributorship, because they needed to provide for the major industries, and they wanted to make sure that people weren't hoarding the items and then selling them back. So I can understand that, as in I was given several units, or sold several units, and from that I've been able to start the business from that. They also have offered training for my employees. So the employees that I use are from the food and beverage industry. So for like Ministry of Health and Wellness, they require a food handler's permit. And within the food handler's permit, that sanitizing and disinfecting is a very important part of it.
Exactly.
With it. So we then have repurposed those employees, because some of them wouldn't have been able to be kept on payroll, but for the ones that were able to work and wanted to work, we gave them those opportunities, and they've been out there from Montego Bay to Kingston to St. Mary, and a lot of them have been working and also offering services free. So as in, we have been doing it with the taxis, offering sanitizing and disinfecting through the Ministry of Transport and Mining and Transport Authority.
Yeah. So this is, viewers, this is a great example of a business pivot. This is PJ Wright, Mint Cleaners Limited. He is a part of the food and beverage industry. He's also part of the entertainment industry, recognizing the need for sanitation in the industries he was involved in, got access to the machines, and now he is in fact running a business that deals with sanitization and disinfectant. So we're happy to have PJ here from Mint Cleaners. Now, PJ, one of the things that people wonder about, if you are in a workplace and there is an alarm raised, 2 of the workers have tested positive for COVID, Mint Cleaners is called in. Can you tell us a little bit about what process you follow in a situation where there is an actual testing, COVID positive testing?
So in a situation like that, as in we are normally informed, what it is the first protocol is to protect our employees. As in, when we go in with PPE, and then also we secure our PPE even further by taping the openings, so the openings to the arms, the openings to the legs, and then we use full face shields and then go in. First thing is to protect them. When we go in, then we do what is actually the deep clean, which is now where we go in and we rub surfaces with this disinfectant. Now, cleaning off any other dirt that may be on the surfaces, and then after that, that is when we do the sanitizing and disinfecting. Because when it is a known area, you really don't want to be sanitizing and disinfecting on a dirty space, especially if it is known to be already infected.
Yes. So at this time, we're also going to just bring Nevada back on screen. And if Courtney is also available, we're looking at some questions coming in. People are certainly quite impressed with your business pivot, PJ. We have Courtney because we have a question here. Antoinette Chen had asked, where can you get electrostatic equipment? I think you mentioned a company, PJ.
So currently, that's the issue. As in, because if you go online right now, we will not be able to find it. They're not selling it to individuals. They're selling it to corporations because they believe that the corporations will need it first. For example, like Marriott, who has several hotels all over the world, they would need it before the person who is just trying to buy one unit to resell it in this time.
Okay. And also, just to mention, there was a question in regard to the protocols for opening of schools. Just to mention, next week, what is being lifted is the work from home order. Schools still do not open until September. What we are looking at from this or the PSOJ collaborative committees, we're looking at daycares because that is one of the areas when parents have to go back to work, they have young children. Where do you leave your children? What about daycares and nurseries? So let me just jump to Nevada on that. Nevada, yes. What are some of the things that are being looked at in regard to daycares and nurseries?
Well, we're just starting that effort with respect to daycare specifically, for exactly the reason. It's a strategically significant industry. Can't be have people going back to work and not having daycare. Now, the issue with daycare is that you can't control children the way you can control adults. So you've got to think very, very deliberately about how the spacing and stuff happens. We are just reaching out to Parenting Commission, particular medical and social psychology and stuff to sort of pull that stakeholder group together. We've started to pull stuff again from around the world, and probably in about 2 weeks, the PSOJ will sort of come, and the local services committee will come out with the protocols associated with daycare. But again, just as Courtney said, there are things that are national that everybody has to do, and then in particular industries, there are particular unique things that it has to deal with, and daycare is certainly one of them. I have some results of polls actually that we've done with the audience, which might be interesting. First question. Which do you think should be the more important priority now for the government? Saving as many lives as possible, 79%. Saving jobs and restarting the economy, 21%. Jamaicans are nervous. Again, so we have to hear also what, and it's not that them not hungry and worried about the job, right? Is that they're thinking life, make sure I'm safe, right? Okay. Second question we asked, what is the best way to create public awareness around the new operating protocols? TV news, 13%. Online video, 33%. Newspaper press release, 13%. Posters in establishment, 40%. People want the physical reminder when you walk into the space that I can remember, yes, this is what I'm supposed to do. So the two top ones is an online video that hopefully goes viral, that everybody see. And then when I go to the restaurant or go to the bar or go to the salon, I want to see the poster that reminds me what the protocols are for that particular area. All right. Then now the question on the tourism. Is it time to open our borders and bring in tourists? Yes, we are ready, 14%. No, it is too soon, 64%. Not sure, 21%. right? Jamaicans are nervous. We need to understand that the protocols, the positioning, how we phase the opening is part of how we're going to sell the idea to Jamaicans that we're going to move forward safely. I don't know. Do those numbers surprise you guys? Or you would guess that that's kind of where it would come out?
Courtney, what are your views on those numbers? Courtney, you're on mute.
Not surprised. I am not surprised. I do think Jamaicans are very concerned of the downside of COVID-19. So you'll see a reservation. That might change certainly as time passes, but I am not surprised. It's time to be concerned right now. We're still early in the game, and the expectation is that there is going to be a surge. And so when you add the tourist factor on top of that, as I said before, it's an imported disease. So the tourist sector, of all the sectors that's there, Jamaica really did not shut down. We really did not shut down. We had some restrictions in terms of time and all of that stuff, and it caused an impact. The only sector that, to me, that by definition end up being shut down is tourism because of its nature. We didn't have the traffic coming in. So tourism, in that sense, naturally shut down because we closed the borders on there.
And what we're certainly finding is that the heightened concern, the worry, even though we should not be anxious and worried, that's what the Bible does tell us. I think the concern and the hypervigilance is very important, because this is how these protocols will truly be implemented, because we will take responsibility for ourselves. I want to bring in PJ, because PJ, you have been involved in deep cleaning and sanitizing. What are some of the things that you've seen in businesses that have caused you a bit of concern about how much effort is being put into sanitization, and what kind of recommendations would you make to businesses at this time?
All right. So for me, what I've seen a lot of is, I don't think that there's a lot of persons who are in business who are taking this part serious. I think they may be taking the impact it has been having on their business a lot more serious than the impact just overall on their customers and also on their staff. Nevada said it earlier, you have to bring back the trust from the customer and in staff. That's the only way for us to get back to normalcy. Because if you don't even believe that the impact of COVID-19 is real, you know the economical impact is real. If you don't think the health part is real, the economic part is real. We have seen it. So for us, we have to put in measures to show everyone that we're serious about it. And employees need to understand that when they come into work, they need to follow these things. And if they don't follow these things, there may be a result of dismissal at some point if someone is just totally not following them. And then customers need to know that if they are in an establishment and they're not following them, that they may be asked to leave. And those are the things that we know as a society need to put in place for it to be the norm. And this norm is what will allow us to know, not worry, start realizing that I might be a little too close to somebody, even if I don't see a sign on the ground. And then also, one of the things that we have implemented with Mint is that once it is that somebody has started a contract with us, which is that we come in on a weekly basis and sanitize and disinfect, is that we put a seal on their door. So once somebody comes in, they see it and they say that for the month of May, the month of April, month of June, it's there, and you see that it's a company. It's similar to like one of those alarm company signs. You know that the person who has that on their building is serious about security. So the criminals stay away, and the person who is supposed to be there feels secure that if there's a situation, they know that a bike will be riding up with some help.
Actually, it's funny that you said PJ, because in my mind it registered. When I saw the video of how you clean and how you guys clean, it would matter to me if somebody said Mint cleaned. It's the psychology of that kind of signage would matter. I think it could be a selling point. We have one more poll. Of course, do Jamaicans have the self-control and discipline to follow workplace protocols? Yes, we do if we understand the reason, 44%. No, we do not, 56%. So we are skeptical about our ability to do this, but let's see. We're going to find out very soon.
Yeah, and that's why you do have to have the balance of the self-regulation and the actual protocols and guidelines, determinations of what things are mandatory and what things are optional. And businesses will have to look across the gamut. My workers, how do I protect my workers? How do I protect my customers? How do I indicate to the public that I am serious about sanitizing? I'm serious about disinfecting. Courtney, from where you sit and you're listening to these numbers, from a public awareness perspective, I think one of the things people ask is, Nevada mentioned earlier in his discourse that certain things might need regulations. I'm a lawyer and I know that regulations can happen quickly. And regulations can 10 years from now be still in a committee determining what are those regulations. How serious are we about quick movement in anything that needs to be passed, any regulations that need to come into play?
Let me step back a little bit on those polls that Nevada presented. My observation of it, very interesting. You notice all the polls that he gave, for the most part, except the last one, folks were high on not wanting to open up and all the things around COVID. You notice when it came down to the personal responsibility, how much they fail there. What it says is how important is the communication, the promotion, and all of that is going to be important. We have to help people along this way. That is what it's saying. I myself find it difficult to maintain these protocols. I'm not going to lie. I want to take the mask off quickly. I mean, I'm touching my face. I'm doing all this stuff. It's not easy. So the lesson here is, and I think the ministry recognizes, so that's why we're putting a lot of focus on the communication and promotion. That's where we are gonna need help. And you ask me, what is my biggest fear out of all this? My biggest fear is just that, is that we as a society cannot keep that discipline to be sustainable and stuff. We're going to need help doing that. That is where the biggest breakdown is going to be. And that's why the communications and the promotions by the government and by the private sector, all stakeholders within your establishment, as was said, you place the signs there and keep at it. And if people violate it, it might mean dismissal. It might mean that, or it might mean some reprimand. We've got to be serious about it. So that's just my thought there.
Yeah. PJ, and we have PJ. So PJ, you know, we have to touch on another area of your business exploits. You're a part of the entertainment industry. And for the most part, I mean, everything has had to shut down. Carnival has been moved to October. And, you know, Jamaicans, people anxious to touch road and wondering what is the next event. I mean, I know we're doing all kind of parties online, and we had Bounty and Beanie clashing online, but Jamaicans love to touch road and we love to party tight together. Now, from where you sit in the entertainment industry, what are your concerns with the how do we phase back in the entertainment in terms of parties, events? What are some of the things that we'll have to bear in mind?
So from the Dream Entertainment having to do with Dream Weekend and Exodus Carnival, our main clientele is imported, is tourists. So what we realize is that's on hold. But what it is that you'll see is a lot of local entertainment. We'll see where it is that events will become smaller. And what it is that we'll have to know, people will know, have to do whatever they're planning a lot earlier, having to do with the customer, making sure that you have space for 100 people if it's 100 persons that you're going to be catering to, and make sure that you have all the things that are required. You're going to have multiple entry points in case it is that you buck up on someone that has a high temperature. You can't close down everything for that. So it's going to be that we're going to have to now implement some of those protocols of reopening, similar to like what the PSOJ has done for different sectors. We ourselves are doing that, and we are focusing now on what it is that we believe is a reasonable way to entertain ourselves and put on a good product that is something that can be sustainable, because we understand that it's going to be less persons, but we can't be charging much more for that, and we have to make sure that persons are going to want to come back out.
Okay. I'm seeing here a comment. Carol Narcy says companies having systems of reward for workers, clans, etc., doing the right thing will also help. That's a very interesting comment, because that is now businesses looking, and as a part of their engagement, including monitoring, enforcement, and doing the right thing as a part of the reward system. That's a really good point there. Nevada, based on the various protocols that we have seen across the world, I think we had a comment earlier about Norway, where someone had mentioned the opening of Norway. I'm not seeing it come up here now, but when you're looking across, we have Courtney here, we have PJ, we're looking at sanitization, disinfecting. When you are looking at what is happening globally, what are some of your concerns and some of the concerns that are coming up from the committees?
Well, here's the issue, right? And the thing that we have is that there's an equation that you're trying to optimize, right? If you're doing a lot of testing, so if you're a country with enough money to do a lot of testing, and you have good contact tracing things in place so that you can surgically figure out so I find out, Rochelle is positive. How quickly can I figure out where Rochelle was and identify those people? If those kinds of things are in place, you can actually open up with a more looser setup than one in where you're testing less and so on. So what happens is literally it's like one of the simultaneous equations. If you have a whole heap of hospital bed and a whole heap of resources, remember, most people don't die from this. You don't have a problem. People can get sick, throw them in the hospital, you're fine. The problem is if you have minimal resources.
Not through Nevada, we would put them in the hospital. Not
them in the hospital, right? But if you have scarce health resources, scarce testing resources, then the strong protocols are critical for you to be able to get through the pandemic. So really, I don't know the exact situation in Norway, but for example, my guess is Norway has far more testing per million population. Norway probably has a more extensive healthcare system that can support more people, and so and they can probably do contact tracing pretty quickly. Those are critical to saying how you can just do a phased approach, no matter that kind of thing. But in our situation, we're constrained by the tests, we're constrained by the hospital capacity. We need to open in order for that we don't starve, and therefore it is the strong protocols and monitoring each other that are going to save us. So we cannot take this lightly. Everything hinges on ordinary Jamaican behavior. That's really what's critical.
And I think one of the things too is, as the various committees have been looking at the protocols, and you just raised that point, and looking globally, we look globally at what the various protocols, what has worked, what has not worked, what phased approaches can be used, and then we have to apply it to a Jamaican context. And I think that is very important for us to note. We have to think about public transportation. We have a very active taxi system, which is a big part of how our economy runs. So we have to look at all of these various aspects. So we bring in the global best practices and then we apply them across our own industries. So Nevada had mentioned earlier barbers. In every country, the way our barber shop is also a place of recreation. So how you apply protocols, you have to be very aware that our barbershop is a place of recreation, as is our hairdressers. So we have to be even more hyper vigilant. So ladies and gentlemen, we are joined for episode 10, the PSOJ 7-step framework for reopening business safely. Courtney Cephas, who is Executive Director of the Ministry of Health and Wellness Foundation, and PJ Wright, Director of Mint Cleaners. And of course, I face, very regularly, Nevada Poe. So before I give Nevada the last word, because we're going to wrap up shortly, and for those of you who do not have it and you're wondering, where Nevada get all of this information and where can I find all of these protocols? An extensive document was created and distributed by the PSOJ. Email us at sme@psoj.org so that you can be on the mailing list and you can have access to these protocols and guidelines. And before we wrap up, I'm just going to ask Courtney first. Courtney, any last words for our viewers? I see somebody asking about staycation. I know that you would do very well with a staycation now because you have just been working round the clock. Any last words of to our viewers as we're looking to more persons going back into the workplace next week?
I would say this: the disease is real. We have 3.6 million cases worldwide. We have 350,000 deaths. You look at the United States has 1/3 of that. If you look at certain countries that have done well, they took certain actions very, very early. The countries that did not had leadership that failed to take actions early. You look at Mexico, you look at Brazil, you look at the United States, you look at the UK, and you look at Russia, who are experiencing tremendous amount of deaths and body bags. Those countries had a disbelief in the leadership. And Jamaica took action very, very early. And you can credit that to those early actions for where we are right now. And all the work that has been going on in readying the economy, in readying the country, the testing, the early testing, in isolating, detecting and isolating to prevent spread. That was key. We had limited resources, as Nevada said earlier, so we had to utilize it well. And we followed a protocol in partnership with which the best around the world did. And it makes sense. So my last word, it's real. All of us should do our best to follow protocols without a vaccine or a cure, and play our part because it's going to be necessary. It's the only way.
Yeah, and we certainly don't want to reverse all of the success that we've had with the early efforts by just throwing our hands in the air. And we have PJ, right? PJ, you are a part of the business community. When you see the work from home orders being lifted for next week, what advice would you be providing to your fellow business owners at this time?
So at this time, I want to plant a seed. So here's my seed that I am planting. We have industries like the tourism industry. You have the restaurants that have all been hit. Even when they open back up, they won't be opening back up at near 50%. So there are a lot of employees who will be out of work. Let us as business people look to see how we can repurpose some of these persons into sanitizing and disinfecting. The fact is, you can do an online course. There's enough literature out there. While electrostatic may be the best technology, it's not the only technology. I would recommend other people getting into sanitizing and disinfecting. If you look to Asia and you see what Asia is doing, Asian countries, I think you see Singapore, you see China, you see all the videos that you see coming out, you see constant sanitizing, disinfecting, and wiping these things because it is effective to prevent the transfer. I would say, let us put together a workforce, put them out there, find a rate that works, and put people to work. This may not be good for my specific business that I'm for mint cleaners, but what it will be is that it will make Jamaica get back to normalcy, and it will also instill wearing a mask. It helps a lot with the stopping the spread of particles. But you know what it does as well? It reminds us of the times that we're going through. When I see a mask on a face, it reminds me that we're not in normal times. And that is the part that I would say. We are not in normal times, and we have to look to create new measures that will allow us to get back to normalcy, or what will be our new norm.
Some strong points there. And thanks again, PJ Wright, Director of Mint Cleaners Limited, Courtney Cephas, the Executive Director of the Ministry of Health and Wellness Foundation. Courtney reminded us that this is real. This is real. Let us not reverse the good work that has been put in so far. We have to take this to the finish line, and it will mean monitoring, enforcing, awareness, self-regulation. We're all a part of this. Yes. PJ spoke from a business perspective and unselfishly said that, in fact, this business of sanitizing and cleaning and disinfecting, we all need to be a part of it, and it needs to be spread wider. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. Some great points. PJ, we're so happy to also have had you on as somebody, as a true example of pivoting, that pivoting is real. And thank you also for providing guidance to other business owners for what can be done. And PJ, we can find Mint Cleaners. I see you at Mint Cleaners on Instagram. Any other contact information for those who would wish to get in touch with you and understand a little bit more?
Okay, our number is 999 Mint, which is 6468. But you can remember it easy, 999 Mint. And you can get us at info@themintcleaners.com, and we answer all emails.
Okay. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. Nevada, interesting conversation.
Absolutely.
Interesting poll results.
Yes, for sure. Rochelle, one of the last message I would send to our listeners is this. And Courtney sort of led it. The reason our numbers are actually in pretty good shape is because of the actions we're taking. But the problem is, psychologically, we will say, when I'm shut down the economy for, when the numbers are so bad. So when we put the strong protocols in place and we see that the thing is not spreading, it is not a reason to pull back. It's a reason to dig in and to say, we are opening while this is working. So do not take the fact that the thing is so bad and say, what am I close the economy for? What am I close the tourists for? It's not so bad. It is not so bad because of the actions that we took. Right? New Zealand has 0 new cases. That happened because of draconian actions they took earlier. It is not by chance. We are going out into the workforce. Take care. And if you don't believe it for you, then at least your fellow Jamaicans. We need to be our brother's keeper in this time more than ever before. Choices about your safety are now affecting the safety and health of others. Yeah. So let us make sure we recognize that. It's not about freedom. It's about protecting each other, loving each other, being there for each other.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Nevada. So viewers, thank you again. This is episode 10. Can you imagine episode 10? So we are 10 weeks into COVID cast. Today we looked at the 7-step framework for reopening a business safely. If you joined us late, please email us at sme@psoj.org. We looked at the 7-step framework that involved determining sector priority based on touch risk. What are high touch risk areas? What are low touch? Define protocols in the categories, the workers, your customers, your patrons. These are very important. We have a very extensive set of protocols in the memo that was issued this week. Please send in for your email. Ensure stakeholder buy-in. Stakeholder buy-in is very important because the collaboration, the buy-in for the spread of the information for enforcement is critical. Determine sector support, the regulation that is needed. It was so funny that a part of the one of our poll results showed that people wanted online videos, but You remember poster, good old poster that you put on the wall because people want to be constantly reminded when they go into an establishment. The Ministry of Health and Wellness, the private sector is working with government and citizens. We are working together for alignment and approval. Public education, communication, communication far and wide, and monitoring and enforcing. So we can monitor and enforce by putting a big stick over. But we as Jamaicans recognize that the preservation, in fact, one of our polls, saving lives, is so important to us. So we are saving not only our lives, but the lives of our fellow Jamaicans, and we're going to do this together. We've done a good job so far. We have lost some of our people, but we have been able to contain the numbers because we have worked together and the government has been very proactive. Let us keep the work going. So please email us at sme@psoj.org. Join us again next week for another episode of the PSOJ COVID Cast. We're right here at 4 o'clock on Facebook Live. If you missed any of our episodes, they're all posted. Go back and watch them. Send in your questions and comments. Share this video. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. And I will see you again next week because you have stayed safe and you have followed the protocols. Next week.